Agradecemos muy especialmente la presentación.
We thank Mr. Anderson for his presentation, and now invite Dr. Huerta. We will start with the Q&A session now. Don't know if there are any further questions. Please raise your hand so the assistants may get your questions. We have a question for Dr. Huerta. And the question is, why don't you measure the pH for beef? In these 100 years, the system has been used for quality because this is not related to yield. pH has not been considered. We know there is a curvilinear relationship or ratio, and the maximum hardness is at 0.8, a pH of 0.8, and after that, the beef is more tender, and the same happens to the left. The pH of 5.6 or 5.7. But up to now, the system validations have shown that this is consistent. And as a matter of fact, we don't want to make life more difficult for the meat packers. That's the reason we are not using pH. And this is a question for both speakers. To what extent do the grading systems grading systems used to improve the genetics of the herds? We know that producers in your countries use the information to improve the quality of the live animals and to improve the sustainability. Is that true? Did you get the question? Should I repeat it? The question is, sorry, I thought he was going to answer it, so I didn't pay attention. Could you repeat it? It's a long one. Yes. To what extent are the grading systems used to improve genetics in the herds and in the management of the herds? Part one. And part two, producers in your countries, do they use the information to improve the industrial quality of the live animals and to improve their profitability? First, I would like to say that the answer to the first question is yes. During these 100 years of evolution, the system has been adjusted, changing the marbling requirements and the physiological features about a dozen times. And this is because of the genetic changes in the domestic herds, U.S. domestic herds. I told you that early on, 1917 or so, we mostly had Hereford cattle, small animals. In the 60s or 70s, we began to use European continental breeds from Italy, from Spain, Simmental from Germany, Limousin from France, to increase the size of the British genetics. And with these animals, which took longer to grow, that developed fat later on, marbling later on, we had to make some other changes or adjustments. So the answer is yes. As the genetic changes influence the quality, the system was adjusted to. It is a dynamic system, of course, and all systems that may be devised in any countries have to be dynamic, and they have to be adjusted. The yield grades date back to the 50s, and now researchers have realized it's necessary to review the Morphy equation, the one that is used to make the grading based on yield, because we have bigger animals with more muscle, with less fat, a larger number of dairy animals that have limited fat on the surface, but more cavitary fat. And of course, for all these large number of breeds, we have over 100 breeds in the US, so at some point in time it will be necessary to change the system somehow to assess the yield, so that it will reflect the consumer's requirements. We are continuously monitoring through sensory panels how the quality grades behave or are perceived, and these signals are transmitted backwards to the primary producers. But I believe it's a system that is properly validated, scientifically validated. And it has been very useful, of course, to diversify the offering through private brands. Most of the private brands that want to be known for their quality are using marbling in the upper two-thirds as choice. So therefore, the choice consumers have is much wider. And marketing surveys are being carried out to find out whether the consumer expectations are being met.
A few comments to that. I mean, if you, and this was shown in the last slide from Nelson earlier on, the number of grades that have been added, whether they're private, grades, or whether they're a result of new grades that have come into the system. Really, we used to have, as grain-fed packers, we used to have prime, choice, and select. That was it. Today we have many other grades. CAB became a major factor. Certified Angus beef can only accept, though, choice, two-thirds. So that meant that only about 20%, maybe 25%, now it's a little bit higher, of all the Angus cattle, only 25% classified as CAB. So what are you going to do with all those other Angus? There's still a demand for Angus. So we started then, you have certified Angus beef and you have Angus beef. So you start differentiating within the grade, not only for Angus beef, but also retailers or people overseas, they want to have what we call the upper two grades of choice. You also see people that want to have what I call story beef. They want to be associated with beef that came out of a certain state or out of a certain plant. So you can have programs in Washington state that are called beef from the Northwest, or beef from Iowa, or beef from Nebraska. So there's many different programs that have developed over time, primarily, not primarily, but certainly a vast amount of these programs are designed for the export market. Hormone-free, we do hormone, our company did hormone-free to Europe. We're talking natural cattle, that is for the domestic market, but also for some of the export markets in the Far East. So it's an ever-changing dynamic. You know, nothing is going to stay the same forever. As a matter of fact, things change within months or days in order to meet the expectations of the foreign marketplace. So it takes a lot of effort, but you have no choice. The same thing when large supermarkets in Argentina come to you and say to you, I want this type of specification and I want it on Monday. Either you comply, you meet the inquiry, or you don't get the business. It's the same in the United States when people like Walmart or Kroger or Winn-Dixie come to you. And it's also the same in the Far East. Either you meet the requirements or there's alternative suppliers that can get the business for you.
I think there was something about sustainability in the question. Is that right? No, I read it wrong way. Let's go to the next question. Is there in the US a mandatory price reporting system? Should people report all buying and selling operations for live cattle, carcasses, cuts?
Price reporting for beef cuts and also cattle. But you have to be very careful how you interpret that, because not all specifications, they are basically your basic category specifications. But when we produce a short rib or we produce a short plate, it might be much different than what the competition might do. So a lot of times there are certain exemptions for price reporting, and that is primarily related to the export business as well as some of the offal business, because there are so many different specifications. So that would be somewhat misleading for both buyers and sellers.
One of my last slides showed a scanned image of the monthly price report according to the different qualities and yields. Let's go to the next question. A professional from the National Agricultural Technological Institute from Argentina asked about the role of research organizations in the grading system. That's a very important question, because unlike the little relationship we have in our country between the industry and the academia, in the US there is a very close relationship. Almost all producer associations, CBA, the National Cattle and Beef Association, most of them have programs through the checkoff program. Every time a live animal changes hand, $1 is paid. And same thing when animals are imported. That money goes to a federal fund that is used by producer associations to set research priorities. I mean, organizations set priorities and universities compete for those funds. Sometimes two universities have to get together to do research on an important topic and to have an interdisciplinary approach or to achieve synergies. So the answer is yes. The academia, the livestock industry, cattle breeding industry have a close relationship and work together. I'm a graduate from Texas University, just like Miguel. This university has a long-standing relationship with the industry, and major systems in the green system have happened as a result of research in the university. You have seen those grades from 1 to 8. That is a result of applied research. Texas Tech University, where I'm working right now, there is such a close relationship that they even work with politicians. We may get good news in the near future. Our director of the Institute for the Excellence of Agri-Industry, will be appointed Vice Minister in Agri-Food Safety and Quality. And this says a lot about the importance of our policy and our work with university. This is a question for Royal Andresen. Grading goes from the packer to the consumer, is that right?
So if you buy choice product, the quality grade will be on the label, which will be go all the way through to retail or food service if necessary, so the consumer knows what they're getting.
And this goes beyond the US. I worked in Mexico for 12 years for the exporter federations, and all boxes coming by ground along that border shared between the US and Mexico, all the boxes are labeled with the grade, quality grade. And by the way, maybe one of the big things with the US that exported 10% of its production, that is based on market research and market intelligence. We supply based on the needs and based on consumers are willing to pay. Most of the legs go to Mexico for consumers with a lower purchasing power, while prime cuts and sirloin go to Japan or Korea. And this is how the international basket is spread out. The last two questions for Dr. Huerta. How can you sell to many markets without traceability when there is individual traceability, meeting the requirements of programs managed by the Agricultural Market Service, AMS, with age checking or other parameters that may be necessary? And Ruel may also add to this, there are also private traceability programs to meet those requirements. But so far, the US is taking its beef to 133 countries. The last question for Dr. Huertas. Dr. Huertas, what do you think should be the path to be taken by Argentina in this respect? Well, you will have to hire me if you want an answer to this question. Argentina has a good reputation in European markets. People really value Argentinian beef. Rowell was saying something very interesting. Europeans expect beef with not too much fat and pasture-fed beef. Same thing with Mexico. Mexico takes bull's beef to some countries. It's a country image, country reputation, and there are marketing opportunities there. We have to tell a story, as Rowell said. People love hearing stories. So definitely Argentina has a huge advantage as compared to the US. We're concerned about the size of our carcasses there. You're still working with young animals, smaller animals, so the conversion is more efficient, even when castrated. In Venezuela, we have issues because we have bullock beef for bulls who are 3 to 5 years old. You have all the advantages, all the conditions to be successful. I think the new system after 40 years will have to be fine-tuned based on the new market, international market realities. And as I've already said, all grading systems can be improved provided validations are science-based. We're used to speaking our own truth. We're used to believing we have the best beef in the world, countries, provinces, states. We do need a national standardization program that goes from the province of Corrientes to Buenos Aires. Grading should always be the same. Graders should have no conflict of interest. The Department of Agriculture ensures grading in the US through an independent third-party assessment. And this makes the system robust. Definitely, people do believe in the Department of Agriculture. Service shows that the DOA is more popular than the US Army. So that impartial assessment is important for the sake of transparency and credibility of the system. And if you want more information, you can just hire me.
Add one comment to that, and as I said earlier on the podium there, that I believe Argentina has a tremendous story. I mean, when initially people looked at America as, the cowboy, and I think you have you have a tremendous opportunity to reflect what Argentina means. You look at the pictures of Argentine beef, you see the vast pampas, and you have this fantastic herd. I think you have a tremendous story. All what you have to do is make sure that you have a coordinated effort in Argentina between livestock producers, packers, government, and I think you can be very successful. But again, ultimately, first you have to decide what your beef is going to look like and what your grading system is going to look like, and from there you can build on getting your reputation in some of these markets. But you have all the tools, you have all the opportunities there as well. I think you have a fantastic story to tell.
Señoras y señores, le agradecemos.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.